lot of people, especially Philadelphia, but really across the country, live in segregated spaces. A lot of people do. So if you live in a segregated space, right, you often attend segregated schools, right? And so for a lot of people, the only experience they'll have with, say, black folks, outside of maybe the one or two people in their class, will be what they see through the media, on social media, on TV, and things of that capacity. So think about what that can do to a person's perception if their perception of a demographic is created not by lived experiences, but what people show them. So if I go home every night, right, and I go to school with majority white kids, and let's say, you know, I'm on the phone just like other people, and I see, you know, the gun violence in Philadelphia, and the crime, and some of the other things. It's not like the news are going to show you much good news, right? So when you go do that walk or that community service, like the cameras aren't there when y'all go do these walks. So that person who never seen somebody who looks like you, just because their lived experiences don't show them that, their only perception of you is drawn here. Often that changes once people go to college and we see, you know, folks from different spaces and all that. But think about it sometimes. But one of the things that's disappointing to me about the black community is that we very rarely find black folks who want to do communications. So 50% of the reason why I'm here is because I want you guys to get this content. But the other side is we're trying to inspire young people to get involved in communications, because when you're a person of color and you get involved in communications, now you control the message and the narrative, and sometimes your lived experiences puts you in a position to be able to provide a perspective that's totally different than other people. I'm gonna show you some examples later, but Max, I'll pass it back to you.
So I'll go very quickly, and then if you have any questions about any of these experiences, let me know. So I went to Temple University, I studied communications, and I minored in history. I don't really use my history minor, I just enjoy history. Studying communications, I put on presentations like this, but as Isaiah mentioned, there's also a lot of things you can do with communication. So if what we're saying sounds cool, but being in politics or government is not that exciting to you, there's entertainment communications, fashion communications, sports journalism. There's a lot you can do with it, and it's the same basic principles, just instead of working with a politician, you would work with a singer, an athlete, a brand, what have you. So I would say a good amount of what I do is talk to the media. So either that's me telling a story about what our office is doing, or calling reporters to help shape their views on the story. A lot of times when you're listening to a podcast, you'll hear someone like Isaiah. You won't typically hear someone like me. My role in this is I set up the podcast. So I'll either reach out to a host, or a host will reach out to me to say, I heard Isaiah talking about X, Y, or Z, we want him on our show. And so my job is to prepare the host, who has likely never met Isaiah before, to explain who he is, what we're talking about, what we say. If there's anything that we don't want said, I kind of do that negotiation.
It's key to the T, right? So when you gotta get on stage and you gotta lead a Harambe with like 700 people, talking on Zoom ain't nothing.
Right.
I mean, I don't even get butterflies no more. I'm more nervous before a basketball game than a live TV interview. Well, I shouldn't say live. Live TV make me nervous. That's the only one. Because it's live, so like anything could happen. And most of the time, live TV is national TV. It's not even just local. So, you know, your mistake is there for the world to see if you make it.
I have another question. When doing public speaking, were you like ever embarrassed or made something switch, like somebody trying to make something different from what it portrayed to be?
Yeah,
and it
absolutely.
made you look like a bad guy?
Absolutely. I mean, that happens on council all the time. One of the things I hate about being council is that we the bad guy. But when I'm your age and I'm young, yeah, I had plenty of hiccups with public speaking throughout my high school and college career. And in high school and in college, I never desired to be a politician. I didn't desire to run for office until after I had my bachelor's degree, and I had seen somebody who looked like me, that was young, that was like really making a difference. And it was like, I want to make a difference like that. I just didn't know that that was a way you could do it, right? Because I had never been introduced to an elected official. The idea of an elected official having a personal relationship with them, that didn't happen until about 22, 23 for me. And once I seen it with my own eyes, that's what made it seem attainable.
We saw that a couple of defund the police type of things didn't go over that well in some communities on Tuesday. This seems to have a broader appeal than a slogan that some people don't understand the full version of.
We think that it does have some appeal. I mean, again, this is putting us in a position where we are trying to offer a practical solution as it relates to a problem that a lot of us know exists, not just in Philadelphia, but in urban areas across the country. And we're very, very proud of the fact that it's been received well by not just legislators and constituents, but also other stakeholders who are very, very vested as it relates to this issue of policing communities in power.
We want to follow this very closely to see how it works and whether it can spread to other cities across the country. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Isaiah Thomas is a Philadelphia City Council member and the sponsor of this bill.
Oftentimes, Isaiah will reference someone. So if we're talking about education, he usually brings up Sankofa. And so the host will call me and say, we'd really love to get a student because he said this and they said this. And so my job is doing a lot of connecting with different people. So when you're listening to a podcast and you hear those series of interviews, that's kind of how Isaiah and my relationship works. So Isaiah would be the person that you hear on the podcast. Max, just to remind you, I'm the one who kind of sets up those different relationships. Yeah.
So you basically like help the hostess with their questions for Isaiah.
Sometimes, in a dream world, I get to write some of the questions. Sometimes they don't like to give me the questions beforehand, and that's also part of it.
I think the first step is that he schedules it, right? So, for example, let's say I'm not familiar with what podcasts are good and what podcasts are bad, right? Actually, that's too subjective. I'm not familiar with what podcast topics of discussion. So there are podcasts like Wallow and Gilly, they got $1 million worth of game, right? When I talk about on that podcast, gonna be totally different than when I talk about on Charles Ellison, who has Reality Check, right?
Different topics,
Right. So Max is I ain't gonna know what everybody talk about and what all the podcasters are about. And then you got other podcasts that's just not worth being on because maybe they don't have a good following. So Max's job is to know the podcast, right? Like who it is, what the audience is, what's the questions going to be about, what's the platform, right? Where would I be? Am I outside? Am I inside? Do I got to wear a mask? Should I have a suit on? Can I dress how I want? It's a lot of details and nuances that he has to make sure is ironed out and correct, right? Because if he tell me that it's outdoors, it's indoors and it's outdoors, well now I'm cold, right? Like if he tell me that we're going to be talking about real estate taxes, and we end up talking about voting rights, well, that's completely off. My notes aren't prepared. So I need to just be able to walk into whatever interview that I'm about to do and have Max give me a quick one-pager. This is who you'll be with. This is your audience. This is what they're going to talk to you about. That's his job. The purpose for me talking to this class and being here today was to help provide young people with what I feel like is important content as it relates to the world of communications, specifically political communications, and the importance of young people, specifically young people of color, getting involved in the world of communication. And then also on top of that, we wanted to be able to provide some unique content so young people could understand the work that we do and how communications is a part of the work that's being done in City Council.
The purpose in talking to this class today was to give young people an understanding of what goes into communications, how to get a career in communications, and hopefully inspire more young people, specifically people of color, to consider a career in communications.
Some minutes I walk about.